Well, hi everybody, I'm Nolan. Hoffman, thanks for joining us tonight for East Texas in Focus. Let's get started. Well, with East Texas students getting ready to head back to the classroom in just a few days, tonight we are focusing on making sure they stay healthy during their return to classes. Recently, we had the opportunity to sit down with a team of doctors with CHRISTUS Health. We heard from 3 CHRISTUS physicians who talked about adjusting kids' sleep schedules for this back to school time, the most common illnesses this time of the year, and how you can also make sure your student athlete at home can stay healthy both on and off the field. This episode tonight is packed with a lot of good advice for parents, so make sure you stick around. Parents know that quality sleep is essential to their children's success at school. With quality sleep, children have improved mood and the ability to focus. Sleep is also essential for forming and retaining memories. One doctor tells us how parents can help their children get back on a sleep schedule for school after this summer break comes to an end. Do you think a lot of kids' sleep schedules are messed up going back to school? I'm guessing they were staying up late during the summer, enjoying their summer.
Yes, yeah, without a doubt, that's going to be a big problem going in. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks for you to adjust to a new sleep schedule. So we anticipate that being a struggle for a lot of kiddos in the next month or so.
And sleep adjustments are hard for anybody, adults, children. For them specifically, how hard is it to get them back on a normal schedule, especially going to bed at like 7, 8 o'clock on a school night?
So make one change at a time. You don't want to expect perfect results on night 1, but it's never too early to start. So things like having a good bedtime routine, limiting your screen time for an hour or 2 before bed. That's going to be a struggle for a lot of parents. Kids aren't going to want to give up their phones or their tablets or their computers or whatever, but it's really, really important. Also limiting caffeine to hopefully no caffeine after noon, and limiting sugar for a couple of hours before bed are all going to be really, really helpful. Also just having a consistent routine and a consistent bedtime, starting that now is going to pay off big time in the future.
Especially grade school children, what time should they actually be going to bed?
So everybody's a little bit different. In elementary school, kiddos need closer to 9 hours of sleep a night. Once you get up into the high school years, it's more like an adult sleep requirement. But that is going to change from one year to the next as kids have growth spurts. And everybody needs different amounts of sleep. Roughly in the high school years, you're going to need 6 to 8 hours a night. And so whatever time you need to get them to bed to get that amount of sleep before they need to get up. So work from the time they need to be out of the house to the time they need to get up, and work backwards from there to know what your bedtime needs to be.
Everybody talks about phones specifically impact your sleep. Mm-hmm. For children in specific, why exactly is that?
So there's a couple of different ways your phones affect your sleep. The blue light that's emitted by all screens, phones included, is interpreted by your brain the same way sunlight is. So if I look at a phone right before I go to bed, I'm telling my brain that the sun is up and it's time to get up and do some work. So turning off those screens for an hour before bed is really, really important. Also, you learn what room you're in your house and what each of those rooms are for. So we recommend that kiddos use the bedroom for nothing but sleep. If they're laying in bed looking at their phone, then that teaches them that sleep is not all I do here. And so definitely turning the phone, even just keeping the phone out of the bedroom would pay off.
Getting in bed at a certain point, of course, is important, but what's an ideal time for kids to get up in the morning so they have enough time to get ready and they're not stressing?
So my kids need about 30, 45 minutes to get up, get awake, get themselves fed and dressed. So roughly that amount of time is going to be across the board. Some kids need a little bit longer. And it's going to vary. Parents know their kids, and so they're going to kind of know and be able to anticipate how much time they need before they leave the house. But I would say at least 30 minutes, so they're not just getting up and scrambling to get out the door.
Finally, is there anything else you want parents to know before their children head back to school, specifically on sleep and making sure their kids get enough sleep, they're going to bed at a decent time?
It's never too early to learn good habits, is what I tell everybody. That the habits that they learn now are going to pay off not just in school, but also into adulthood. So teach them good habits now. Nutrition goes a long way. Limiting sugar, yes, before bed, but also limiting it throughout the day is going to pay off big time. So learn those healthy habits now, and they will thank you for it later on.
Now, Dr. Barker, who we just heard from right there, also tells me it is not surprising that every fall, once children return to their classroom, they begin to see an increase in the number of sick patients at their offices. He also has some advice on making sure your kids stay healthy over the next few weeks. Here's what he had to tell me.
So a few things we're expecting to see spikes in, obviously respiratory illnesses. So cold and flu season is coming. COVID is obviously here to stay. So we're expecting a spike in those as kids start congregating again. Also stomach viruses are going to be really, really common. So things like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea are going to be on the rise here in the next couple of months, we expect. Also heat-related illness as athletics and marching band ramps up while it's still really hot outside. Those are going to be things we need to be on the lookout for.
Of course, keeping your kids healthy is a very complicated question, but where can parents start it at a very young age?
Yeah, so it all starts with nutrition. Everybody hears diet and exercise, and a lot of people, everybody has a different image of what that means. For me, it's limiting sugar substitutes, and processed food. This is what I tell all of my patients every time I see them, just about. So teach your kids to eat healthy food. Don't drink the soft drinks and the juices. Stick with water. Stick with unsweetened beverages, ideally. Exercise. We want kids to shoot for about an hour a day of some sort of physical activity. Finding something they enjoy is going to be really, really important, because if they enjoy exercise, they're going to stick with it long term. If they're forcing themselves to exercise because their parents told them to, that habit is going to die out pretty quickly. So finding something they like, finding a physically active hobby is going to pay off.
Yeah, and with those after school activities, what should parents be making sure their kids are doing before they do all that stuff? Because like a lot of kids are going to football practice, stuff like that. You want to make sure you're hydrated.
Absolutely.
Everything like that.
Yeah. Hydration is a big deal, especially when it's hot outside. Their kids need to be in the habit of drinking probably a little bit more water than they think they need. They need to learn the signs of heat exhaustion and heat-related illness. If they start getting lightheaded or dizzy because they're outside and sweating out all their fluids, they need to sit down in the shade and cool off and drink some water. Obviously, coaches and athletic trainers need to be on the lookout for those sorts of signs and symptoms also.
When it comes to school lunches, I just wanted to ask about this. If they're eating at school or they're bringing a school lunch, with the school lunch, what would you recommend parents pack their kids to make sure it's not only healthy, but it helps them perform well?
So real food is what I preach to all of my patients. If you are eating something that you can go gather from a farm and have it look like what you're about to eat on your plate, I'm pretty much okay with you eating it. So that includes all vegetables, fruit, nuts, eggs, and meat. Hot dogs and lunch meat don't count. If your food passed through a factory, it's now trash, is how I want my patients to think about it. So eating real food, again, learning that habit now is going to pay off long term.
Before they go to bed, before a school night, when should kids have their dinner? When should they not be eating, snacking, stuff like that, so maybe it doesn't disturb their sleep practice?
Sure. So within an hour of bed, you want to be done eating. And in some cases, it needs to be maybe a little bit earlier. 1 to 2 hours before bed, you want to have your last heavy meal, certainly. Some kids do want a little bit of a snack before bed, and I'm generally okay with that. But certainly you don't want to be feeding them dinner 30 minutes before bedtime.
All right, that's a good start. When we come back with East Texas in Focus tonight, we hear about preventing sports injuries at school and making sure our student athletes continue to thrive. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're focusing on back to school health tonight. We've heard about getting back into that normal school night routine and the common illnesses doctors expect to see. Now we are focusing on sports related injuries. Many times these injuries require special attention, treatment, and a plan of recovery and can have lasting effects. This time we heard from Dr. William Gary. He talked to us about prevention both on and off the field and the recovery process that follows when a student or any active adult is sidelined by an injury.
There's a lot about that we see, going back to school, a lot of things that we see. One of the things we see that I worry the most about are just those dehydration and heat-related injuries. People are, we think of football as being, in the fall with leaves on the ground and brisk fall days, but that's not where we are right now in East Texas. Kids are coming back to school at different levels of acclimation. Some kids have been outside, running around in the heat all summer and they're fully acclimated. Some other kids have been, playing video games and not acclimated yet. So they're all coming together to play sports, to do band, to do any other type of activities, and they may not be ready. So I would really like to push my student athletes to hydrate. If you wait until you're thirsty to start drinking, you're already well behind. So, drink before you go, monitor your hydration status. One of the easiest ways to do that is look at your urine. If your urine is clear or pale yellow, you're probably where you need to be. If your urine is dark yellow, you're probably behind and need to correct that.
Specifically with hydration, how many bottles of water or electrolyte beverages should children in youth sports or just in general be drinking a day to make sure they're properly hydrated?
That's going to vary so much depending on the student, depending on what they're doing. Whatever they're doing, I would say probably do a little bit more. But I don't have a specific number. Like I said, monitor your hydration status the way that I just talked about. Looking at your urine, and don't wait until you feel thirsty, or even worse, you feel like you're, confused or lightheaded. Because at that point in time, you're way further down that path than you want to be.
If you're participating in these fall sports, how long does it actually? It probably depends on every person, but how long does it actually take you to get used to this hot summer heat going into the fall, where it's going to take a while to get out of this weather?
It's going to be very much person dependent. It depends on what they've been doing so far. If they've been out running around all summer, they're going to be pretty well heat acclimated. If they've been inside in the air conditioning and now they're just starting up with sports again, starting up with two-a-days, or wearing equipment that's going to be heavy and it's going to be hot, like football equipment or band equipment, that's going to be working against them.
No matter the sport, what injuries do you see the most? Probably
Sure.
Depends.
So at this time of year, again, we talk about the dehydration injuries. Other injuries I'm worried about this time of year kind of fall into two different categories. There's the acute injuries where, you're doing something, you feel a pop, or you get hit hard, or there's a joint in your bone where there wasn't a joint before. Those are the obvious. Those are the acute injuries. The other type of injury that we see a lot of are going to be those overuse injuries, and it's just kind of repetitive use injuries on, maybe muscles or joints that aren't ready for them yet. And both of them, need attention. I think the acute injuries, people are quicker to seek medical attention for. Some of those overuse injuries, sometimes they can kind of fly under the radar, but sometimes they still need attention and they still need, rest in order to recover.
Specifically in football, what should parents be looking out for the most when it does come to an injury? Maybe their kid comes home, they might be limping a little bit, whatever. What should parents be looking at after every practice?
That's a good question. I think it's young people and athletes of all levels. There's a wide range. There is a wide range among athletes at all levels as to how they present themselves following an injury. There are some athletes who are very stoic, and they can be fairly badly injured, and they're not going to self-identify. There are others who are going to have a much, much lower threshold. I would urge parents that to utilize the trainers if their school has them. A lot of schools will have a trainer, and usually they're very well trained, and they do great work in terms of evaluating injuries. Beyond that, if there's a question, go see your doctor. Let it be evaluated. In terms of the risk-benefit analysis, in terms of what could go wrong if I make the wrong decision. It's fairly low risk to go see and get it checked out if there is a concern.
Is there a most common injury you see in football? Again, I know there's a lot of injuries that comes with football, but is there anything you see specifically the most, or at least recently? Is there a recent trend that you've seen the most over the last couple of years with football?
So for football, the injury we worry about the most is going to be the concussion. Okay. And that's just the one that, in terms of long-term consequences, is probably one of the most severe. So we need to make sure that if someone has a concussion, it's identified, and that they do the concussion protocol with a graduated return to full function. The thing we worry about with concussions is that second concussion before you've fully recovered from the first one. And that's the one that some studies have shown is going to have the greater chance of having long-term neurological deficits. So if there is a concussion, do the protocol, give lots of time for it to heal before you put yourself at risk for further injury.
When a kid comes home and he might be acting a little bit weird to his parents, if we're talking about concussions, what should they look out for to know when to take them to a doctor or take them back to the medical staff? I'm sure the medical staff, of course, already looked at them, but if they miss something, what should parents be on the lookout for then?
Sure. Well, we'd be looking for a headache, we'd be looking for confusion, we'd be looking for vision changes, anything that just seems abnormal. Some
student athletes, an injury can change the course of their life, their dreams, especially in the football field, other sports as well. How can parents help them through that difficult process, no matter the injury?
Well, that's a great question. So yeah, injuries can change the trajectory of careers, and it's happened for a lot of people. Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise, A lot of people who think they're going to be a pro athlete, the odds of that happening are pretty low, and so it might actually give them an opportunity to kind of focus on what their real trajectory is going to be. Life is full of disappointments for everybody, and but no plan survives the initial encounter with the enemy, and that's kind of how life can be sometimes. So I just recommend talking to people, trying to give them perspective. Parents who've lived longer life have a better sense of perspective than a young person who's only seen this and has only seen their life going in one potential direction. So I would just counsel them and show them, and there are lots of examples of other people who, thought their life was going to go one way, had to make a pivot, and have had great, wonderful lives. So I would just remind them that they're not the first person in this situation, they won't be the last, and it doesn't limit the quality of their life.
To parents specifically, what can they do to make sure their children are thriving in their respective sports, mentally, physically? Anything you could say about that?
I would say have equipment that is well fitted for them, that's well suited for them. A lot of times, for sports, they go in there, all right, pick out your helmet, pick out your pads, and there's a mad dash to kind of grab things, and you see some student athletes with ill-fitting equipment. Also recommend good footwear, and the shoes that fit in May of last year may not be the shoes that are fitting now with kids growing, and not having good footwear can have a big impact in terms of the quality of their performance and just their overall health. As feet are growing, if they're not allowed to be in footwear that fits them properly, that can have long-term negative effects. In terms of having kids thrive in their sports, nutrition is paramount of importance. Good sleep is paramount importance, and finding a good balance, between sports and between the other things that they have to do in life. Because, to be the best athlete, you also got to be a good student. If your grades tank, guess what? You're not going to be on the team anymore. And so, obviously, teachers and coaches, the goal of sports for children is to, develop the whole person. So make sure that they're thriving in all aspects of life and not just everything for the sports.
In one way you can make sure your children stay as healthy as possible throughout the entire school year. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for joining us back here. Well, in Texas, here students entering school from kindergarten to the 12th grade are required to have certain vaccinations to ensure public health and safety. One doctor we spoke to says do not wait until school starts to get age-specific vaccines. Take a listen.
Immunizations have been around for a long time, and it's the best way we know how to protect against these viruses and diseases that have been around. And so the importance of getting kids vaccinated before school starts, one, is not only a state requirement. It depends on your school, of course, whether or not you need the vaccines to go, and then there's exemptions and all that stuff. But really the best way to protect our children is to make sure that they are immunized. And even if your child can't get immunized for whatever reason, we have something called herd immunity. So even those kids who can't are protected if enough of the people around them are also immune.
Is there any diseases or viruses out there that you absolutely have to get immunization to go to school?
Yes. So on the Department of State Health website, there are certain immunizations and vaccines that are required to go to daycare, kindergarten through 12th grade, and of course even for teenagers as before they head off to college. Living in dorms, there are certain ones that are mandatory. So really all of the ones that we recommend immunizing against are pretty much in those requirements. So, measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, hepatitis A, B, Haemophilus influenza. I think there's a few others there that I'm missing, polio. And then there are some that we recommend as healthcare providers that are not mandatory, like HPV, human papillomavirus, and then of course the annual flu shot. But those are, like I said, still strongly recommended by the healthcare community.
And if a parent doesn't exactly know where to get started with getting their kid immunization, I can't speak, where can they get started? Where can they look at?
Yeah, so I think the best place to start is talking to your primary care provider. So I know there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy out there, and I think as a physician myself, I want to make sure that my patients and their families are protected. So whether or not that's following the classic immunization schedule that we have, or whether or not it's, just talking to parents about how it's okay to use multiple, to immunize against multiple things at one time. There's also different ways we can space things out. In my practice, I totally believe that, the best way to treat someone or to protect them is by following a regimen that they will also be okay with.
Of course, flu season is going to be back in the fall, stuff like that, other things as well, maybe COVID. How prevalent do you think that's going to be, if you can answer it, as children head back to school and college students, stuff like that? Flu, COVID, et cetera.
Yeah, so actually we even had a flu and COVID spike in the summertime here recently. But I think a lot of the illnesses that we'll be seeing, especially when school gets back initially, are going to be the things that we don't necessarily have vaccines for, that we don't even really test for. So things there's so many respiratory viruses out there that we really cannot even test for them all. So I think we'll see a lot of those initially, and those are things like the common cold viruses. But when the flu season comes back up, how prevalent that will be this year, I don't know.
And finally, teaching your children proper hygiene, just like washing your hands, stuff like that. How important is that? Of course it's important, but can you go into a little bit that, especially small children, if they get something that maybe they're not too immune from, that they can protect themselves if they're practicing proper hygiene practices?
So like I said, so a lot of the things that we don't necessarily have vaccines for, the best way to help prevent those is washing hands. When they sneeze, don't sneeze into the hand, try to sneeze into an elbow or into a tissue. Of course, if you can't wash your hands, hand sanitizer is going to be the next best thing. But if hands are visibly dirty, that's when you want to make sure you're using that soap and water.
All right, coming up tonight, closing words tonight. We'll be right back. Well, going back to school is exciting, but to have a safe, healthy year, your family needs to start preparing now. And always remember, during any health scare, the first person you should contact and discuss your situation with is your child's primary doctor. All right, that's going to do it for this week here. Of course, next weekend we'll zero in on much more issues right here in East Texas. Have a great night, everybody, and of course, a safe return to the classroom.